The fluorescent lights flickered above the ER entrance, buzzing faintly like a warning. Nurse Aisha Johnson gripped the clipboard, her pulse quickening as a tall officer stepped into the chaos. His eyes swept the room with a measured, almost predatory scan. "Move aside, ma'am," he barked, voice sharp. "This isn't your space." Aisha's jaw tightened. She'd been here 100 times, triaging, running codes, saving lives. But somehow today her presence alone seemed to provoke him. Her dark eyes met his, steady, unflinching. "I'm clearing the patients," she said, tone clipped but professional. He smirked. "Funny. You don't look like you run anything here." A group of medics lingered nearby, exchanging subtle glances, a mixture of curiosity and silent agreement. Aisha's stomach sank. Microaggressions weren't new, but today carried a sharp edge, a hint of danger. Her hand tightened around the edge of the counter as she guided a stretcher past him. Every step was a negotiation, every word a balance between authority and invisibility. She felt the room tilt, every monitor beep a drumbeat in her chest. Then came the sharp edge of his question, slicing the air like a scalpel. "And who exactly authorized you to give me instructions?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. The patients, the alarms, the crowd of doctors and interns. Everything blurred into one high-stakes moment. Aisha's heart hammered as she realized the officer wasn't here for protocol. He was here to challenge, to intimidate, and perhaps to humiliate. And in that split second she knew. This encounter would not end quietly. Aisha's hand hovered over the badge scanner, the officer's gaze locked on her, and a single thought thundered through her mind. "Do I prove them all wrong today, or risk everything?" The ER smelled of antiseptic and fear. Aisha Johnson wheeled a stretcher through the chaos, eyes scanning monitors, staff, patients. Every beep, every cough, every whisper demanded attention. "Move aside, ma'am," a voice cut through the noise. Aisha froze. Tall, broad-shouldered, a police officer leaned against the counter, hands on hips. His uniform was crisp, badge gleaming, but his eyes carried something heavier, assumption, judgment, dominance. "I'm clearing patients," she said, tone firm, not confrontational. He laughed softly, a low, cold sound. "Funny. You don't look like you run anything here." The words hit like an invisible fist. Aisha's hands tightened on the clipboard. She had saved lives in this room. She had handled emergencies that would break most people. And yet here, her authority was questioned simply because of her skin. "Are you challenging me?" he said, voice rising. "Do you have a badge to prove it?" "I have credentials," she replied, steady. "And I have patients to care for." A whisper of laughter floated from the nearby medics. None stepped forward. Some avoided eye contact, some stared. The room was tense, charged with silent judgment. Aisha felt the weight of every gaze. He leaned forward, smirk sharp. "You should know your place." Her jaw tightened. She guided the stretcher past him, step by careful step. Every movement was under scrutiny, every breath measured. She noticed the subtle smirk of an intern, the slight shift in the senior nurse's posture. Allies, enemies, or neutral? She couldn't tell yet. "Who authorized you to give me instructions?" His tone was precise, dangerous. "I'm clearing the patients," she repeated, louder this time. "Step aside." The officer's eyes narrowed. He looked at her like she was an intruder in her own workplace. A monitor beeped. A patient groaned. Aisha's heart raced. She was caught between duty and confrontation, authority and prejudice. "Watch yourself," he said, voice dropping just enough to slice tension through the room. Aisha's fingers hovered over the badge scanner. She could escalate the protocol, call security, but the stakes felt higher than procedure. This was personal, institutional, and immediate. She exhaled slowly, forcing calm. Every second stretched like a tightrope. The officer's gaze never wavered. The room felt smaller, louder, the fluorescent lights too bright. Her mind raced. Do I prove them all wrong today, or risk everything? The ER had barely settled after the officer's intrusion. Aisha wheeled the stretcher toward Trauma Bay 3. Monitors beeped like impatient drumbeats. She glanced at the patient, a man in his 50s, pale and sweating. "Vitals are dropping," she said, snapping orders. "Start oxygen, prep the defibrillator." "Ma'am," a young intern began, hesitating. His eyes flicked nervously toward the officer, still leaning against the counter. "Yes," Aisha demanded. The intern swallowed. He said only police can issue instructions in this area. Aisha's jaw tightened. He's not a doctor. And this patient needs care now. The officer smirked from the corner, voice cutting like glass. I'm just making sure protocols are followed. Protocols don't save lives, Aisha shot back, scanning the monitors. A nurse murmured beside her, careful not to meet the officer's eyes. Be careful, she said, voice low. He's influential. Careful doesn't save lives either, Aisha whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She pressed the paddles to the patient's chest. The room tensed. Every eye followed her hands. Every heart seemed to beat in sync with the alarms. The officer stepped closer, posture rigid. You're overstepping. I could write this up. Aisha froze. Every word carried weight, threat beneath civility. She didn't flinch. Document it, she said. I'm responsible for this patient. A flurry of activity erupted. Interns moved faster, nurses rushed, monitors chimed warnings. The officer's presence loomed, but Aisha's hands stayed steady. She felt the room tilt between chaos and control. Then a voice broke from the corner. I've got the history, a witness nurse said, stepping forward. He's unstable. Immediate intervention required. The officer's eyes narrowed. And you are? Someone who actually works here, she said sharply. The room stiffened. Microtension rippled through the staff. Aisha felt a flicker of relief. Allies existed, even if quiet. Interesting, the officer muttered. Seems everyone's got a say except me. Aisha's pulse surged. She didn't respond immediately. She focused on the patient, breathing slowly. Every second was measured, every movement deliberate. Suddenly, a doctor arrived, senior, authoritative. What's happening here? His voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Aisha turned. Patient's decompensating, she said. We're stabilizing. The officer squared his shoulders. Ma'am, Sir, step back, the senior doctor interrupted. This is hospital protocol. Nurse Johnson is in charge here. The officer froze, eyes flicking between the doctor and Aisha. The power dynamic shifted, if only slightly. He clenched his jaw, silence stretching like a taut wire. Aisha's hands didn't stop. The defibrillator beeped, the patient's heart rate steadied. Relief washed over her, brief but potent. She stole a glance at the officer. He was calculating, simmering. A whisper from the intern. He won't let this go. I know, Aisha said, keeping her voice calm. I just keep doing my job. Then a micro-twist, unexpected. The officer's radio buzzed. He glanced down, distracted. A momentary lapse. Aisha's mind sharpened. She could use this. She could protect her patients. Focus, she muttered, more to herself. Every second matters. The officer returned his gaze, sharper now. You think this is over? He said, voice low. Aisha's heart skipped. She kept her hands on the monitor, steadying the patient. She felt the room shrink, tension folding in on her. Every colleague's eyes were on the exchange. Fear, worry, uncertainty. Not until I say it's over, she replied quietly, controlled but firm. The patient stabilized. Relief flickered across the room, but Aisha couldn't breathe easy. The officer's smirk returned, colder now, hiding something dangerous. After the chaos in Trauma Bay, Aisha finally slipped into the quiet of the supply room. The harsh fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, almost soothing in comparison to the ER. She leaned against the counter, closing her eyes for a brief moment. Why does this always happen? Her thoughts were heavy, a low hum behind her chest. She had trained for emergencies, for chaos, for every medical crisis, but never for the subtle, constant barrage of judgment. The microaggressions, the cold stares, the whispered doubts about her competence. They wore her down in ways no monitor beep could measure. She thought back to her first year in medical school. Professors had doubted her in lectures, peers had questioned her credentials, and patients had looked past her, expecting someone else to lead. Each small injustice had been a brick in a wall she had to climb over quietly, without complaint. A soft knock at the door startled her. Nurse Johnson, a voice asked. It was Malik, a fellow nurse she trusted. He stepped in cautiously. You okay? Aisha opened her eyes, forcing a small smile. I'm fine. Just taking a minute. He nodded, understanding. I saw what happened out there. That officer, he's testing you. I know, she said. Her hands rubbed at her temples. It's just, sometimes it feels like no matter how competent I am, they see only my color. Malik sighed. I get it. I've seen it too. But you don't let it stop you. That's why everyone here respects you, even if they don't say it out loud. Aisha let herself exhale. The silence of the room allowed her to feel every micro-tension, every sting from the officer's words, every ache of being underestimated. She realized the weight of expectation wasn't just on her shoulders. It was a quiet, persistent pressure from the system itself. She walked to the window, staring at the parking lot below. Ambulances rushed in, their sirens distant but urgent. She had always believed in proving herself through action, not argument, but the mental strain was harder to manage than any code she'd ever run. If only they could see what I see, she thought. Every patient, every life. I carry responsibility that outweighs their prejudice. Her reflection in the glass caught her attention. Dark eyes, set jaw, calm demeanor, but a storm brewing underneath. The silence of the room amplified her emotions. Fear, anger, resilience. A knock again, louder this time. She turned, heart skipping. Malik gestured toward the ER. You might want to see this. Aisha followed, cautious. The hallway was quiet, almost eerily so. She reached the nurse's station. A small group had gathered, murmuring, pointing toward a recorder on the counter. Someone had captured the officer's interaction from earlier. His tone, his condescension, every threat, every smirk. Her pulse quickened. Evidence, she realized. A tool she hadn't expected, a micro-twist she hadn't planned for. She crouched, listening to the playback. The officer's words, sharp and calculated, echoed back at her. For the first time, she didn't feel powerless. The tape could speak what she could not, what the witnesses had seen but hadn't dared confront. Malik leaned closer. This changes things. It could make them accountable. Aisha's stomach tightened. The quiet room felt electric now, filled with potential. But just as relief began to flicker, the door slammed open behind them. Another officer, unknown to both, strode in. His expression was unreadable, authoritative. The recorder's small red light reflected off his badge. He didn't speak at first, he only scanned the room, landing on Aisha with an intensity that froze her blood. The ER erupted into chaos. A code red blared through the speakers, echoing like a drumbeat in Aisha's chest. She dropped the clipboard and sprinted toward Trauma Bay 2. Patient's coding, someone shouted. Aisha skidded around the stretcher, hands steady, eyes scanning monitors. Charge 200. Prep airway. Let's move. The officer appeared again, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, smirk barely hidden. Need a hand, Nurse Johnson? Her jaw tightened. Step aside, she said, voice sharp. Every second counted. Every motion mattered. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Authority, he said, tone dripping. I make sure rules are followed. You make sure no one dies, she shot back, flipping the defibrillator paddles onto the patient's chest. Sparks of tension crackled. Clear, she barked. The patient's heart flickered, then flatlined. The team froze. Charge 300, she shouted. Now! The officer leaned closer. You think this gives you power? Aisha didn't answer. She pressed the paddles again. Electricity pulsed. The heart monitor flatline beeped sharply, then steadied. Back in rhythm, an intern yelled, relief flooding the room. Aisha exhaled, sweat dripping from her brow. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel victory. But the officer's gaze was icy, unyielding. He was not done. Suddenly, the code red intensified. The alarm shrieked for another patient, a multi-trauma from a car accident. Aisha's legs moved before her mind caught up. She guided the stretcher, her voice precise, unyielding. Get the 4-line. Chest compressions now. The officer stepped forward, hand twitching toward his radio. I need a status report. Do not interfere, she snapped. Her eyes locked with his, every ounce of authority radiating. This patient's life comes first. A hush fell over the medics. The room split between tension and awe. A few interns exchanged glances, some inspired, some afraid. Her hands moved with practiced precision. She could feel the officer's impatience like a physical force pushing against her. She refused to falter. Every microsecond counted. Then came a twist. The officer's radio buzzed loudly, making him step back momentarily. Aisha's gaze flicked to Malik, who nodded subtly. Opportunity. She barked orders. Suction. Airway open. Prep for intubation. The officer returned, his smirk gone, replaced by tight lines. You're lucky I wasn't. Lucky or not, lives are being saved, she cut in. Focus on the patient or step aside. A staff nurse whispered. He's filing complaints already. I can see it in his eyes. Aisha's pulse surged. Then let him file. I've got patience. She pressed the paddles again, eyes never leaving the monitors. A moment of stillness, heart rate stabilized. Relief rippled. Colleagues exchanged quiet smiles. Aisha's gaze finally met Malik's, silent reassurance. But the officer's shadow loomed. He cleared his throat, voice low, venomous. You think this ends here? Aisha didn't flinch. Not until every patient is stable, she replied. Another alarm blared. This time it wasn't just a patient. Someone in the waiting area had collapsed. Chaos threatened to overtake the room. Aisha moved fast, directing medics, calculating steps, eyes flicking to every monitor, every chart. The officer followed, pacing, ready to challenge her at any mistake. She felt exhaustion coil in her shoulders. Every minute was a test of skill, resilience, and patience. And she knew this officer was watching, recording, judging. The administrator's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer. The officer straightened, badge gleaming, posture rigid. Aisha stood with the patient stable, hands shaking slightly, pulse still racing. This isn't over, the officer muttered under his breath. The administrator's gaze flicked between them. I've received a complaint, he said, voice clipped. From Officer Daniels. Aisha froze. She had anticipated confrontation, microaggressions, even intimidation, but a formal complaint threatened her career. Sir, she said, keeping her tone steady, the patient was stabilized under my care. I followed all hospital protocols. Protocols, the officer interjected, voice sharp. I observed unprofessional conduct. Nurse Johnson overstepped, issued orders outside her jurisdiction. Aisha's jaw tightened. Every word was loaded, every syllable a test of her composure. She felt the weight of the room, colleagues whispering, interns exchanging anxious glances. Malik stepped closer. She was doing her job. The patient's life mattered more than protocol. The administrator's eyes flicked toward Malik. Noted. But Officer Daniels is persistent. This could escalate. Aisha swallowed hard, heart hammering. She had survived dismissals, doubts, whispered slights, but this was public, official, formal. And it carried authority. Do you understand, the officer said, stepping forward, that this complaint could have consequences? Professional consequences. I understand perfectly, Aisha replied evenly, voice controlled. I also understand what's right, and I will not compromise patient care for your ego. A tense silence followed. Every breath in the room seemed loud. The administrator tapped his fingers, watching, weighing. Then came a micro-twist. A voice piped up from the back. I recorded everything, a junior nurse said. She held up her phone, trembling slightly but determined. Every word, every order, every threat. The officer's eyes flickered, momentarily off balance. His lips pressed into a thin line. Aisha felt a surge of cautious relief. Evidence existed, proof of intimidation, microaggressions, and her adherence to proper care. The administrator leaned closer, inspecting the phone. Interesting, he murmured. This could change the context. The officer's smirk faltered, replaced by a subtle tension. He adjusted his stance, trying to reclaim authority. A recording doesn't change the facts, he said, voice low, controlled. Maybe not, Aisha said softly. But it reveals the truth. And the truth matters. Whispers spread through the ER. Colleagues shifted, some nodding subtly, some still hesitant. Power dynamics were shifting, finally slowly toward acknowledgement of her authority. The officer stepped back, fingers twitching near his radio. Every second stretched. Aisha's heart raced, pulse quickening, mind calculating next moves. The administrator looked between them, eyes hard. I will review this evidence. But know this, any further disruption will be noted. And I expect professionalism. Aisha nodded, masking relief with composure. She had survived the initial assault, but institutional bureaucracy had teeth. The complaint hung like a cloud over her head, threatening, ever-present. Malik whispered, quiet but firm. They can't touch you. You did everything by the book. The recording proves it. Aisha nodded again, internal tension easing slightly. Still, fear lingered. The officer's presence radiated hostility, and the administrator's scrutiny reminded her. This fight wasn't over. A sudden beep from the monitor drew everyone's attention. Another critical patient arriving via ambulance. The ER shifted instantly back into chaos. The officer's gaze returned to her, sharper now, as if calculating. His voice, low but dangerous. "You think this recording saves you? It doesn't. Not yet." Aisha felt the weight of the words. Her chest tightened. She could feel the room closing in, tension folding around her like a vice. The ER had quieted momentarily, but Aisha's mind raced. She moved to a side office, Malik at her shoulder, pulling up the phone recording the junior nurse had made. Every word of the officer's condescension, every challenge to her authority, played back clearly. "This is perfect," Malik said, eyes wide. "It shows exactly what he did, and how you handled it." Aisha nodded, tension coiling in her chest. "It's more than just proof," she said. "It's a record of the system failing me, and of me saving patients anyway." Her hands hovered over the keyboard as she typed, compiling notes, cross-referencing hospital protocols. Each entry reinforced her professional authority, highlighted the officer's overreach, and documented witnesses. The room hummed with quiet urgency. "Are we going to show this to the administrator?" Malik asked cautiously. "Eventually," Aisha said, voice low. "First, I need everything in order. If this escalates, I can't afford any gaps." The officer appeared suddenly at the doorway, shadow dark against the fluorescent lights. "Still plotting, Nurse Johnson?" he asked, voice sharp, mocking. Aisha didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the screen. "I'm documenting. Everything. For patient safety. You might want to do the same." He smirked, but the edge in his expression faltered. "Recording, huh? Clever." "Not clever," she said. "Necessary." Malik cleared his throat. "It's not just the recording. Multiple staff saw everything. Your actions are being witnessed." The officer's smirk disappeared entirely. He straightened, attempting to regain composure. "You think you can expose me?" Aisha glanced at him, calm but firm. "I don't think. I know. I have the evidence, the protocol, and the witnesses." A sudden beep from the hospital intercom drew their attention. Another patient in critical condition. The officer hesitated. Aisha moved immediately, directing medics. She felt his gaze burning into her back, a reminder he wasn't finished. Then came a micro-twist. One of the witnesses, a senior nurse, stepped forward with her own logbook. She had noted the officer's tone, actions, and interference. "Everything he did is in here," she said quietly, handing the notebook to Aisha. Aisha's pulse quickened. Layers of evidence stacked neatly in her hands, voice recordings, written logs, witness accounts. The power dynamic began to shift palpably. The officer's lips pressed into a thin line. "This doesn't prove everything," he said, voice low, dangerous. "It proves enough," Aisha replied evenly. "It proves the truth." She took a deep breath. The weight of responsibility pressed against her chest, but determination burned brighter. Every patient, every colleague, every instance of intimidation had built to this moment. A soft murmur ran through the ER as medics noticed her assembling the documentation. They glanced at each other, realizing the tide was turning. Allies were finally emboldened to stand, even subtly. The officer's fingers twitched toward his radio. "You think this ends here? One phone call, one report, and you're done." Aisha's jaw set. No phone call can erase the facts. No report can erase what actually happened. Suddenly, the intercom buzzed again, louder this time. "Security alert. All staff, remain in your stations. Supervisor incoming." Aisha's eyes met Malik's. The micro-twist was clear. The administrator would review everything now, but the officer might escalate. Every heartbeat felt like a drum in her chest. She straightened, holding the recording and logs. "It's time," she said softly. "The truth is about to speak for itself." The officer stepped closer, voice quiet but sharp. "You'll regret this," he whispered. Aisha's hands didn't tremble. "No," she said. "I will not regret saving lives or showing the truth." The ER seemed to hold its breath as the administrator stepped forward, legal staff close behind. The officer straightened, trying to radiate authority, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Aisha held the recording and the logbooks firmly, hands steady. She felt every eye on her, colleagues, interns, patients waiting just outside the room. Every microaggression, every belittling remark, every threat she had endured led to this moment. "Officer Daniels," the administrator began, voice crisp, commanding attention, "We have received your complaint along with this evidence." He gestured toward Aisha. And after reviewing hospital records, Aisha's heart hammered, pulse quick, but she forced herself to stay calm. She met the officer's gaze directly. "We find that Nurse Johnson is not only fully credentialed but holds the position of lead surgeon for the ER," the administrator said. His voice echoed through the room. Gasps rippled through the staff. The officer froze, his smirk disappearing entirely. "What?" he stammered, trying to mask shock with arrogance. "Yes," Aisha said quietly, voice firm, unwavering. "I am the lead surgeon. I oversee operations in this department, including emergency protocol and patient care." A murmur spread across the room. Interns exchanged wide-eyed glances. Nurses shifted, suddenly aware of the depth of her authority. Even the security staff straightened, noticing the officer's sudden vulnerability. The administrator's eyes were sharp. "It appears there was a misunderstanding of chain of command. Officer Daniels, your interference violated hospital protocol." The officer's jaw tightened. I wasn't aware." "You were," Aisha interrupted, calm but cutting. "You chose to ignore protocol, intimidate staff, and question my competence based on assumptions. That is documented here," she said, lifting the recordings and logs. Malik stepped forward, voice steady. "We all witnessed it. Every word, every action." The officer looked around, realizing the tide had shifted. No smirks, no whispers. Everyone in the room acknowledged the truth silently. He had lost the power he had wielded for so long. Aisha felt a surge of controlled relief. She had been underestimated for years, dismissed, questioned, and undermined. But now the truth was visible. Her authority was undeniable. The administrator nodded toward the officer. "This incident will be formally noted. Your actions constitute professional misconduct and will be addressed accordingly. Any further attempts to intimidate staff will result in disciplinary measures." The officer's hands clenched. He opened his mouth, closed it, finally muttering, "I understand." Aisha exhaled, tension easing slightly. She turned to her team. "Let's focus on our patients," she said, voice soft but commanding. Every nurse, every intern, every colleague seemed to straighten, reassured by her presence. A small smile broke across Malik's face. "You did it," he said quietly. Aisha shook her head slightly. "We did it. All of us. The evidence, the witnesses, every single person who stood up mattered." Another micro-twist. A patient from earlier, recovering quietly in a corner, gave a thumbs up. Even in the midst of bureaucracy and confrontation, lives were still being saved, the ultimate proof of her authority. The officer slunk back, muttering into his radio, likely reporting the formal reprimand. He had no allies left, no microaggressions left unchecked, no room to assert dominance. Aisha's gaze returned to the ER monitors. Patients still needed care, emergencies still came in. Her victory wasn't in celebration. It was in the affirmation of truth, skill, and resilience. The room buzzed quietly now, not with tension but with respect. Every colleague recognized the reality. She had endured, she had risen, and she had proven herself beyond doubt. The ER had returned to its usual rhythm, but the air felt different. Colleagues moved with a subtle reverence, whispers replaced by quiet nods. Aisha walked through the hall, clipboard in hand, heart still racing but steadier than before. The administrator approached, flanked by the hospital's legal team. His face was composed, but his eyes carried approval. "Nurse Johnson," he began, voice firm yet respectful. "The committee has reviewed all evidence. Officer Daniels' actions violated protocol repeatedly. He will face formal disciplinary action, including suspension and mandatory retraining." Aisha's pulse surged. Relief mixed with lingering tension. Justice was not instant, but it had arrived. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Not just for me, but for every staff member who's ever been intimidated or dismissed unfairly." A nurse nearby whispered, "It feels right." The officer stood in the corner, jaw tight, hands clenched. No smirk remained, only simmering resentment. Every attempt to reclaim power had crumbled. He had been publicly exposed, his authority dismantled, his bias laid bare. Malik stepped beside Aisha. "You did it," he said softly. "We all saw it. They can't undo that." Aisha shook her head, managing a small, tired smile. "We all did it," she corrected. "Every witness, every colleague who spoke up, this was a team effort." The intercom buzzed. Another patient arrived, critical. Aisha exhaled and turned, stepping into action. Her hands moved with precision, calm and authoritative. Life went on. Saving lives was always her mission, her true measure of power. Then came a micro twist. A journalist from a local medical publication appeared at the ER entrance, notebook in hand. "Nurse Johnson? I understand you led the ER during a high-profile incident today. Would you comment?" Aisha glanced at the administrator. He nodded subtly. She took a deep breath. "I can comment," she said. Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of experience. "Our focus is patient care. Authority should never overshadow responsibility. Protocol protects lives, and bias has no place in medicine." The journalist scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Aisha realized her actions today would resonate beyond the hospital, a ripple of accountability reaching the wider community. The officer turned, eyes flicking to the journalist. Recognition dawned, the public exposure was coming. He could no longer hide behind privilege or uniform. Aisha's gaze swept the room. Medics, interns, nurses, patients, all witnesses to resilience, truth, and courage under pressure. Emotional weight pressed against her chest, but this time it was tempered by relief and quiet pride. "Do you feel vindicated?" Malik asked. Aisha shook her head slowly. "Vindication isn't what matters. Change matters. Awareness matters. And every patient we save is proof that resilience can overcome bias." The administrator placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your leadership today, calm, decisive, ethical, sets a new standard for this hospital." Aisha's eyes softened. The tension that had gripped her for weeks began to ebb. The officer's punishment, the acknowledgement of her skill, and the systemic review signaled a small but significant victory. A hush fell as another patient stabilized under her guidance. She realized the day's chaos had transformed into affirmation. Each microaggression, each threat, each moment of intimidation had been met with competence, courage, and undeniable proof of authority.